Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the lecture on the American Revolution, where we'll take a look at the Continental Congresses leading up to the Declaration of Independence, the actual war, some of the strategy, and then what was happening in society with certain groups during and after the war. Okay, as we look, the First Continental Congress occurs. Some big things that came out of that as these colonies met, besides Georgia, was that, and this was after the Intolerable Acts. So we get them coming together saying that we as colonies will not unite under British authority. 2, that we're going to boycott all British goods. 3, we should probably start preparing for war, especially Boston area, Massachusetts. This is where we get the Minutemen. Okay. 4, we'll send a letter of grievances to the king. Hopefully that this can be resolved. And then 5, we promise to meet again next year in 1775. Now, about 3 weeks before the Second Continental Congress was supposed to meet, we had the Minutemen who had been preparing, stocking up arms, and we get Lexington and Concord. Basically, British troops were going to go make some arrests, find these arms and gunpowder, and take them. And so we get the Paul Revere famous ride, warning the Minutemen, the Redcoats are coming, the Redcoats are coming. We get our first casualties of the war, the shot heard around the world. Each side will say it's the other side. They get to the Redcoats, the British Army, get to Concord after Lexington, don't find any supplies, and on the way back to Boston, they're harassed in guerrilla warfare tactics, which we'll see throughout the war. But this will really kick it off. We'll have the British now send more because at first they thought they were just squashing a rebellion. And it actually is becoming a bigger issue, especially with the Second Continental Congress. When the Second Continental Congress begins to meet in the summer of 1775, there is 2 different camps. One for independence, especially the Adams brothers, John and Sam, and then some delegates from Virginia. And then there are those who just want this issue resolved, like Dickinson in Pennsylvania. They will be meeting, and one of the big things that happens when they're meeting is that colonists actually start to side with this idea and this notion of independence for a couple reasons. The British are asking for help from the Native Americans. They're asking slaves to help. In turn, they'll give them their freedom. And then number 3, they're using Germans, the Hessians, mercenaries basically to fight the war. And so this is going to build up. They're also realizing that we're spending a lot of money, and this is the kind of this first phase where, are we actually at war? Is this war? What is this? Okay, and we don't really have anything. And it's going to slowly build, and one of the big things that is going to come out is Thomas Paine's common sense. Basically saying, look what your government, your British government, is doing to you, and how could you want to live under that? So it is common sense that you fight for independence now. With that in turn, we get to the Declaration of Independence, which we'll look on in class on Thursday and Friday. And with that declaration, we get a declaration basically of war, and we are basically breaking up with you, and let's go. So the first phase, questionable. They also, Continental Congress, establish a Continental Army. George Washington will be the leader of that. And so we have an official army. It's not just a bunch of militias now. Now, this is a horrible picture, but this is going to be kind of the second phase of the war, from 1776 with the Declaration of Independence to 1778. This will be fought in the North and Mid-Atlantic. Okay, the British had a large amount of troops, superior numbers. However, their communication amongst leaders wasn't very good. Their plan in the North didn't go as planned because the leaders didn't follow it. And then also George Washington, and these techniques will be used ironically in the Vietnam War. But he understands that it's almost a waiting game, that he just has to wait out the British, and hopefully he gets the French to join on his side. Okay, and so he's going to do all these things just to keep his army afloat. They're not supplied very well. They don't have money. It's hard to retain troops, and so he's really having to keep them together. Now, one of the most famous, you could say, small battles was in the winter when both sides were on winter camps. Basically, he crosses the Delaware on Christmas. In 1776 and kind of causes some problems for the British. He wins a couple other little battles, but he basically keeps his army afloat till the Battle of Saratoga. The Battle of Saratoga is crucial to understand in the sense that what it allowed the French to see that, hey, we should actually recognize the United States of America because they actually might be able to win this thing. And so France will come and support us, and they'll start sending troops, they'll start sending their navy, and this is when we have a legitimate chance. This is when we get to the third phase of the American Revolutionary War, from 1778 to 1781. Now, this is when the British realized that their strategy in the North and Mid-Atlantic didn't really work very well, and now they need to gain some support, and they feel that most of their support is in these southern states. They also are hoping they can rally slaves behind them. So they'll move to the south. The colonists will follow. We now are waiting for the French. French get here, they'll help us out, and it'll all culminate in the Battle of Yorktown, where we'll win. Now remember, this is where we see a lot of that guerrilla warfare too, especially in the south, kind of that swamp area. And so we win Battle of Yorktown, we get them to surrender, and then we get the Treaty of Paris. Now, the Treaty of Paris will do two things. Basically, Ben Franklin's supposed to wait and have the British in negotiations. They're taking forever, and so Ben uses his diplomatic skills to basically make sure that the French aren't too angry at him, but while negotiating with the British before the French can really get in there. We get what we want. We get our independence, clear-cut independence, and we get kind of some gray areas of where our land is. So we'll get from the Canadian border to Florida and from the Atlantic to the Mississippi. Those are the big things that come out of the Treaty of Paris in 1783. Okay, now we have to look at some specific groups in society during and after the Revolutionary War because this will help develop society and our national identity. First, Loyalists. Loyalists were loyal to the British crown. They were in hopes that the British would win and it would help their standing in society. There's estimated between 1/5 and 1/3 of the colonists were loyal. Many of these will flee. Many of them will go to Quebec, where we get our first British group living in Quebec. And so you have that. This also has a huge effect on religion in these colonies, as the Anglican Church or the Church of England will have it notched down. Okay, it won't be seen as highly just because of how many loyalists were a part of it. You're also going to see the rise in such groups as the Baptists and also Catholicism, where we'll get our first bishop in the United States in 1789. Slaves, okay, in the South, this is going to confirm their need for slavery in the sense that it will keep independence and these natural rights for the white colonists or white Americans, and so it is you could say already a necessary evil for that. In the North, though, there's going to be huge anti-slavery sentiment. It's going to start in Pennsylvania. The first thing they're going to attack is the slave trade, and then finally they're going to actually just ban slavery. Now, emancipation will go slowly in these states, but it will be a anti-slavery North into the early 1800s, where most northern states have banned that. Although it's not going to happen right away, emancipation is going to start slowly for some. This is when the North will become anti-slavery. All those ideas of natural rights, they see life, liberty. However, we also need to understand that many people, just because slaves are free, do not feel that they are equal. And that is a huge difference we need to understand, especially when we get to Lincoln. Native American relationships are going to go downhill for a couple reasons. A, the colonists are going to want westward expansion, which conflict is going to be all the time. Many Native American tribes fought with the British, which is going to have a lot of resentment from the colonists, and they're also going to be seen as inferior Thomas Jefferson, the third president, is going to see them as noble savages, and really the only way that they can be I don't want to say human, but like us is if they conform to white ideals. And then last, women's rights. With all the men in the colonies fighting, women had to take a more prominent role. There were some that did very well at this. There were others that didn't. Women would also travel with the army, and so the line of gender role, would kind of get blurred in those cases, but it was really reestablished afterwards. We get this idea of the patriarchal system, especially in law. But women start seeing themselves as, equality, but not equal rights for us. And so there's the questions about that. But really, we get this idea really afterwards of Republican motherhood, where it's their jobs to raise their kids to be great citizens of this new nation. And so that's, in a nutshell, the American Revolution and society during and after that time.